All right, we are live. Welcome. A little bit late today. We were having a little catch up in the background. Hi, BJ. How's your week?
I'm good. How are you today? How are things?
Well, I'm getting ready for my first appearance, or my guy's first appearance in the playoffs here. And since we're in the play-in round, we're the 23 seed, so we got a ways to go. But we have not been in the playoffs since 2008. And in 2008, we were the state runner-up. So okay, things happen. So happy to do it, and excited for the boys. It's a good start.
That's an exciting time. I'm sure every coach thinks of their playoff run, their favorite one, or can remember every match, and in some cases remember a lot of the points that are played in those critical playoff games. Hopefully, some wins and not all losses. We tend to brew on
Yeah.
losses a little bit, but
One
yeah,
of the
that's
things
cool.
Yeah, one of the things this year I've tried to keep reminding myself is that after any loss we've had, that it bothers the guys for about 30 minutes, maybe. And the coaches, it bothers for a couple of days. So it's kind of like, okay, maybe we should act more like our guys. But anyway.
Uh, I got a couple that still bother me. They're
Yeah, there you go.
10 years old,
Yeah.
15, 20 years old.
Uh, yeah, I gave that up. But, well, I think I gave that up. But I'm sure there's something brewing in the back there. So, well, tell us a little bit about what we're doing today.
I asked Dan Mickle on. He's been on in the past for us. We had
Well, wait a
Dan and
minute.
his
He
daughter.
wasn't on. Morgan was on. Dan was
Well,
with Morgan.
he was on for a little bit, and then yes, his daughter Morgan was the ace of that show for
Yeah.
sure. We're that specific show was about parenting an athlete when you are a coach, and how to let them go off on their own. I think that was maybe, I don't know what episode that was. I should have looked, maybe 3 or 4 or 5, somewhere early on, I think.
Yeah.
But Dan does have a job other than dad, and that what he does has been in the news as of late. So we thought we'd get him on and talk through some athlete mental performance and where we're going with mental performance in the U.S. Trending and problem solving, and maybe some of the reasons for some recent issues that we seem to be having.
Awesome. Well, let's get him in here then. There we go. Hi, Dan.
Hey, it's like magic. I just pop up on the screen all of a sudden.
There you go.
So Dan, tell us again. The last time we were talking about you more as a parent. Give us a rundown, a little bit of what you do, both professionally and then in coaching, because they're going to merge today in our topic.
Sure. Professionally, my title is a performance psychology consultant. I'm still finishing my PhD, so I can't use the word psychologist at this point. So hopefully at some point that'll drop off and it'll just be performance psychologist. And basically, the majority of my focus is actually getting good players to become great players. But obviously a part of what I do is also then working with, players that are having some bigger struggles, harder struggles, I guess. But that's not the bulk of my work. And we'll certainly talk about why and how that, works. And then the other side of it is I'm a lead coach for USA Volleyball's Para Beach Volleyball program, which is, adaptive sports. And we're trying to get the beach sanctioned for LA 2028 Paralympics. And I also coach Division III women's volleyball at York College in Pennsylvania. So that's the background of it.
I'm really glad you framed it out that way, because I've got a couple graphics here just to kind of show some of the things that challenged athletes are facing right now, just because it's a really hot topic right now. But I think that helping players to advance, to get past self-limiting sorts of things and that sort of thing is probably of greater use for coaches. But I will say I've had one athlete this year who was going through some difficult times, and having a little bit of background and just because of the coaching courses we need to take and the teaching courses we need to take to try to handle that with some level of, I won't say expertise, but at least knowledge is very helpful to coaches, because sometimes we can see poor performance or detachment or whatever as being kind of resistant to our coaching, as opposed to a kid who needs some help.
Yeah, and that is, we talked in the pre-lobby, for this show a little bit about mentioning how, we're not all experts in this, but yet we have to deal with it a lot, especially as coaches. And one of the things that, I have to be careful with is there's a point where my work ends and then a professional needs to come in. So I'm, especially on the women's side of the game, I'm very cautious about what I talk about in a professional sense outside of the coaching from the psychology standpoint, because I'm not a clinical psychologist. So I don't really deal with, eating disorders and image disorders and depression in the clinical sense. And I think that is part of where this gray area is, or where it's the struggle for the coaches, because we deal with these players a ton, but we're expected to be the psychologist and, everything else. And it's a really fine line where, hey, are you sure you're eating enough, crosses that line a little bit, where we might not know just an act of what we think is caring could be triggering to the athlete. And that can be a big issue as well. We have the best intentions, but we don't know how we say or how we act might trigger some of those responses in our athletes.
Yeah, it's
right. I mean, this right here,
Yeah.
but what just happened right there is what happens every day in every gym, right? We don't know what to say, what's right, what's wrong. We search. And I know that you're going to put that graphic up about searching, and that really doesn't help either. If you look at, you just do the Google search on athlete mental health or student mental health, and this is what comes up. All these, suicides put a spotlight on how hard it can be to be a student athlete and all that, and it's getting all the attention, and deservedly so. But one of the things that most people don't know is the athlete is actually an extremely small percentage of this demographic's suicide rates. In fact, there's some studies out that show that participation in athletics helps lower those rates in most demographics. And the problem, though, is with anything, sports are very polarizing. So we're seeing about all these athletes committing suicide in the struggles. But the truth is, the average person of that age, or just the average student, is probably more likely to be going through this than the athlete. And I think we're putting a little bit too much burden on coaches and athletics in this sense, that it's more of a culture and an education and institutional wide situation that needs addressed, and not just athletics.
Yeah. Yeah, I ran into that with my athlete. I just had a conversation with his mom. Just said, he's obviously was upset the other day, and it really wasn't in the gym. And I can't remember which seminar, or it's probably several of them over the years, CAP training, that kind of thing that we talked about. And I think it probably came from John Kessel. But, I try to remind myself I'm probably the best part of their day. Or our gym is. I'm not. Definitely would tell you I'm not. But the gym and being with the guys and having the opportunity to kind of do something physical is probably one of the better parts of their day. And we got to try to keep it that way.
Yeah, and I think that's where we might be failing, because I don't think we're keeping it that way. I think we are, as a whole, not just the athlete, but I think we're just burning students out. Everyone's doing everything on top of everything. The days of just going to school and coming home and then being a kid are gone. Even my youngest, who's in third grade, is, you got to do this extra and you got to do that extra. And, and he's doing stuff in third grade that I didn't do until fifth grade. We just talked about that. My wife and I were talking about it the other day. It's just, I feel like they've pushed our kids so far to be so advanced that we've missed a big developmental chunk. By pushing these kids so hard and to start things earlier and get things going earlier, we obviously have to give something up. So what's the trade-off? And I think we're starting to see that backlash. I don't think this is a new thing. I just think we're now seeing the results of what's been going on the last couple of years.
I think that's where and I know I asked you a question sort of like this a couple weeks ago, um, just regarding the program I was in. Um, are we seeing? Are we perceiving a downturn in athlete mental health, or is it? Are we just more aware of it? Because we're starting to talk about this. So are we learning about what athletes are going through, or are we really having some sort of I wouldn't say a crisis, but just I think a downturn. It's harder for athletes is the perception that we're starting to feel.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think we're more aware, and I think we're also pushing them harder than we have. Um, you know, we talk about, for example, like Morgan is in 8th grade. She's playing junior high, and there's days that she gets up at 5:30 in the morning to get to school, and she's not coming home till 9 because she has her middle school practice or game, and then I pick her up and take her straight to her club practice or game. So there's times that she's literally on the road or out or doing something from 5:30, 6 a.m. until 9 o'clock at night. And that used to be extremes. When I think about years ago, that used to be extreme, but now that's kind of the normal. We always talk about the benefits of multi-sport athletes, and I agree with that 100%. The problem is we're doing multi-sport athletes at the same time. You have kids going from one sport to the next sport in a day. And I don't think that's what we want or what we meant when we said multi-sport. It was one season, end it, move into a season and move in. And now everyone's just trying to go year round with everything. So you have kids layering top on top. I mean, I don't understand how we expect kids to be at their best performance when they have to switch from being a volleyball player to being a softball player, in a car ride going from one practice to the next. That's a hard focus to switch. And man, if you have a double bad day, I mean, what happens if you have a bad day at the volleyball court and then you go straight to softball and have a bad day at softball? You're getting dumped on twice. And I think we're just trying to do too much.
Yeah, and that was I was about to get into what are the reasons if there is this downturn. I think that's a big one. A couple of the other things that have come up that I've seen, I'm just wondering about the validity of some of this is, are we pushing them too hard? Are we too win hungry? Are we, is it because, for college athletes now they have the pressures of NIL and it's not just name, image, likeness. That's the pressure. It's they're putting pressure on themselves to go and get these types of sponsorships. There's the jealousy factor of, my teammate or the other college has a great NIL opportunity or something along those lines. And then just the added scrutiny of being, if you're a spokesperson for someone, you have a little bit of, you're going to be seen around town a little bit or on a billboard or that kind of thing. I mean, there's added pressure there as well. I'm wondering if that's it, or even, we tend to throw a lot of things at this pandemic. I wonder if some of our coping skills coming out of that have either eroded or strengthened to some degree. I don't know. I'm interested in your thoughts on all those.
I think it's really comes down to almost a perfect storm situation where all these things are happening. You add in the effects of social media, and I mean, there's a million studies about how social media is affecting mental health in everyone. And you add that in with the ending of a pandemic, with the NIL, and just the competitiveness of what everyone's doing. I mean, if you guys think about it, I mean, I turn 48 tomorrow, and if I think about my high school and how many players went on to play in college, like legitimately, not club or whatever, but literally play on a team, the number was actually very few. A good chunk of football, a good chunk, maybe 10 or 20, signing that letter on signing day at the high school. But now it's, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And I get probably 30, 40 emails a day for recruits looking. So I think everyone all of a sudden is trying to do it. So you add in the stress of that, the competition of just playing at the next level, let alone actually getting to the next level, social media, and then the NIL. I mean, luckily for Division III, the NIL has had very little effect, if any, for me. But even that's, you bring that up, and that's tough because, and I think where we have a problem with the NIL is it's not a national thing. The NCAA says, okay, this is our NIL policy, but each state has their own. So, for example, what we can do in Pennsylvania is completely different than what the California kids can do. So now they got the stress of that, and it's just, and I said it, and I got a lot of heat for it, and I stand by it. At the beginning of the pandemic, I wrote a blog post. Everyone was fighting, we got to get sports, these kids' mental health, and we got to get sports going. And I said, sports are the last thing that we need to worry about. It's not the time to get sports going again. And I got a lot of heat about how kids are depressed and kids are moping and situations because they don't have sports and they're in these lockdowns. And I think we rushed back to it. I think we went straight from a dead stop, everyone being locked in and couldn't do anything, to starting right up like nothing ever happened. And I don't think we took seriously. A lot of people were upset and complained about not having sports, but they didn't use that time to heal and kind of get things prepared and maybe just mend a little bit. But here we are. We're back open and kind of going full speed like we were, 2019, 2018 almost. But the problem is we're carrying that baggage with us from 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, that rings true to me. Thinking about performing in 2020 when we finally did get things going, athletes were struggling to. It was almost like they wanted to act like they were happy, and
Right.
it was more of an act than it was the truth of things. You saw that in a bunch of different places, and that was, I think that added a layer of stress for a lot of athletes as well. I don't know if you had any of that experience, Dan, but we certainly did.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of unique in that, for whatever reason, and well, I know the reason, and people might call BS on it, but it's the truth, and my assistants can even talk to it. In 2019, right? Is that we went into lockdown in
20, I
2019 and
think.
2020, right? So we finished our season in 2019, October and then into November, and we were getting ready to do our spring season, and I moved it. Typically, we want to do our spring season in April, late March, April, kind of area. And we were just getting the hints that COVID was a thing. It hadn't started ravaging Europe yet, but it was getting ready, like knocking on the door. And I moved it. I said, you know what? Let's have our spring season the day after we get back on campus. So we moved our spring season from April to the like 3rd of February we started.
Wow.
And our very last day of spring practice was the 13th of March, and Pennsylvania went into mandatory lockdown on the 14th of March. And I remember that last day telling our girls, "Hey, you're going to be getting letters and stuff from the school, and they're going into, because they were getting ready to go into spring break." And I told the girls, I said, pack your stuff like you're not coming back from spring break. Anything that you might need, just pack it. And sure enough, midway through spring break, the school said, we're not bringing you back. You're all going remote. So we were the only team in our conference. Both our conference has two sides. It's the last NCAA conference that's actually two conferences in one. But we were the only one out of the 18 that had a spring season that year because we went early. And I think that may have saved us because I prepared them for it. We practiced knowing that we might not come back in the fall. And then when it didn't happen, they were kind of prepared for it. And, kudos. A lot of people bash the NCAA, and probably rightfully so for a lot of things. But one of the things that they did right away and pretty quickly was change the rules on how you could practice and how you could meet with your team then moving forward. So we were able to do stuff via Zoom and remotely, and that really did help us. But obviously at that point, I was already doing a lot of that stuff for my regular job. So transitioning to doing stuff remotely was easy for me. I know a lot of coaches struggled with that, but it is what it is. And then when we were allowed back on campus, but we weren't allowed to have the full team, we had to have social distancing. If we were, and I kind of caught them when they said, when you're in the gym, you can't be more than 2 versus 2 because of social distancing. And I was like, man, that, with a roster of 22, if I can only go 2v2, that's going to be really long days. And I caught them on the fact they said, well, if you're in the gym, I'm like, well, what about outside? Well, outdoor rules were different. So outdoor, we were allowed to go 6-on-6. So I just moved all our practices outside. So that whole fall, and we made it the whole way to the first week of November, we practiced outside. So again, it was about as normal as you could possibly get. But we just really thought out of the box. One of the big changes that I made coming out of all of this is I'm a little bit more aware of what the mental needs are of my players. And, I have some players that just were stressed out. So, hey, just don't come. We'll make it up. We'll figure it out. It's not going to affect your playing time, your future, whatever. I need you just mentally healthy. And I had players that didn't show up for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And when they show up, it was just like nothing ever happened. And I just decided that was a hit that I was going to take, that I wasn't going to be forceful and say, everyone needs to be here. And if they felt like they just were washing out and burning out, they're allowed to take a break. And this past year, we were back to quote normal or whatever, normal is. And I was a lot more forgiving with that. Hey, coach, I got this big test. Okay, see you at the game tomorrow. And we just worked around it. And it's tough. It's tough when you want to win a conference and you want to make the tournament and all that, but you're trying to balance what's best for your players. And for me, the top of my coaching philosophy is always about the betterment of my players. And I just decided that that's the stance I'm going to take, and I'm not going to waver on it. Now, if you're just doing it to get out of practice and not go, we can figure that out. But I'm a lot more lenient now with my players and what they're doing.
It's interesting you say that because I've been through something similar, different level. I'm at a Title I high school that where volleyball is not a popular sport. Where I go in the gym and I see a 6'2" kid and I go, hey, you ought to come out, and they're like, I'm not playing that sport, that kind of stuff. But even before the pandemic, I saw some things where the kids, I had one my first year, hadn't encouraged. I've been on the North Shore of Chicago club volleyball, moved down here, got a high school team, and one of the guys is like, hey, I got to go babysit my sister this afternoon. I can't be there, can't be at practice. I got guys, hey, I got a job. I got to go, I can't, I had my number one hitter, couldn't be at a match because his job was, in the balance. He had to go and work. So, you have those things, and it's been great because it's got me to think about that. My assistant this year kind of came up through a really good set of club and school experiences with very dedicated teams, kind of where I was used to. And, we'll walk in one day and go, yeah, our setters are, we wanted to work on running offense, but both our setters are out today because one's got a family dinner and the other guy's got a job or, a job interview or whatever. And you kind of go, you know what? We just got to let that go. We got to go, okay, what's practice going to be like? Well, let's work on out of system attacking because we have no setters here anyway, so we'll do that. And it had served us pretty well. I mean, I still would like a little bit more dedication, but I kind of have to keep reminding myself that they've got a lot of things they're trying to manage, and I need to not add to that.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest part of my talk with them was these things are going to happen and I accept them, but please, what I need from you is you just need to let me know ahead of time so I don't walk into the gym and say, "Oh, look, I have 4 players." So that was the give and take, and they were really, really good about that, and they're still really good about that. Um, and the other part that was kind of crazy was at the time of the pandemic, and even today, almost half of my team or most of my team are nursing majors, but during that pandemic, hospitals were pulling anyone they could that had any medical. So our nurses were, our nursing students were all of a sudden pulling these long shifts, during season and stuff. So they were burning out from it. And, I'm not going to stop someone from being a nurse and helping save lives so that we can win a volleyball match. I'm not going to be that way. And I think that stressor probably burned out a lot of kids before they even got out of college. And I think it just goes back to the root of we talk a great talk. There are, those those memes when a student dies and everyone's reposting and resharing those tweets are great. But if you're not putting your resources and your time and training into helping it, then don't share it. And that's been what's really frustrating. And I don't want that to come across crass or mean, but I can't tell you the number of times that a coach will reach out and say, the team's falling apart, or I'm having these issues, or I think this kid's, having a breakdown. And I say, well, what have you done to work on this? Well, nothing. We sit here and we talk about the benefits of sports and how they help with things like communication and conflict management and leadership and wellness. When's the last time you've seen a coach actually incorporate that? They just hope that sports itself organically creates these opportunities. But we have kids spending $2,500 a season for club volleyball, but you can't take $50 of that and do some sort of mental training or, mental health stuff. Is kind of crazy to me. And it happens all the time. I mean, it is what it is. I had a parent the other day ask me what I charged for, a program. And I don't want to sound like a commercial here, but, typically like my self-paced or my guided, are anywhere from $150 to $250. And they were like, oh no. And they're like, that's just way too much. We can't deal with it. But then they're turning around and spending $300 a month on speed and agility and weight room training and all of that. So you're going to sit here and tell me that 90% of the game is mental, but you're going to spend 0.01% of your resources, whether it's money or time, on the mental side. Like it gets really, really frustrating for me in that aspect. Everyone talks about how important it is, but what are people actually doing to fix the problem?
Yeah, just want to draw out an idea that I've kind of heard you hint at a couple of times. It feels to me a misstep that coaches are making is seeing some of these mental performance issues or mental health issues through their eyes rather than getting the information they need from the players or through the players. Do you have any? Can you lend some credence to that?
Yeah, so I got her okay to talk about this before we came on. So I know you guys have met Morgan and BJ. You've obviously been around more. And sorry for the dog that's yapping in the background. Morgan, between the time that she was on your show and when we talked and today, has been diagnosed with ADHD. And seeing her view on things like through her lens has completely changed how I do things, both as a mental performance coach and as a volleyball coach. The the struggles that she goes through just in daily life like hurts your soul, especially as a parent. And I didn't see them. And it finally just got to the point where she really just needed to open up and say, look, this is what I'm struggling with. And I just assumed, like I'm sure every parent did at first, like it's just my kid being lazy, or it's my kid, not paying attention. But it really was her crying out for help. And and that process was unbearably frustrating. Going through the school and just getting everything. Luckily, like her teachers and her coach this year has been really awesome with the situation, and we just talked about it. But there are times that she just won't do anything because she can't. She's either so unmotivated. I wouldn't say depression, but there's nothing triggering any priority in her mind, or she gets so overwhelmed and has basically what we call executive dysfunction, where she can't make a decision because there's too many decisions in front of her. I remember one instance was just something as simple as she was sleeping on the couch for almost 2 months. And I was just like, you have a room, like what's going on? And finally she just opened up that she's like, it's dirty and it needs clean, but I can't start. So her and I just went down to the room, and I sat on her couch and said, okay, well, let's start and let's just get the clothes picked up. So she'd pick up the clothes, and then, let's pick up your books. So she'd pick up her books, and then she got done, and then she's back in her room. But she knew that she wasn't sleeping in the room because it was messy. She knew it needed clean, but she was just frozen. Like as soon as she walked into the room, it paralyzed her. And I started to realize, like, this has to happen with us as coaches. We expect these kids. How many times have we said, come into the gym and, hey, once you're in the gym, just forget about what's going on in life. Don't worry about school for the next 2 hours. Just play volleyball. But it doesn't work like that. It just doesn't. Just forgetting about it or just blocking out is not a coping mechanism. You're setting yourself up for major burnout. So I think probably dealing with Morgan over this last year less has probably been the biggest eye-opener, because as I studied and went through it, you read it and you're like, oh, this makes sense. But until you see someone going through it and realizing this is what ADHD is. And the funny part about ADHD is, unlike dyslexia, and I'm assuming everyone knows what dyslexia is, reading and things being transposed. That is considered a learning disability, but ADHD is actually a medical disability that affects learning. So a lot of times when you talk to someone about ADHD, they think of it from the learning aspect, but it's a life-changing aspect. And it's just the little things. And when I look back at the little things that frustrated me with her, things like she would put dishes away but leave the cabinet open, or she would leave lights on, or she would leave a door open. And those are all signs of ADHD. It's not her being lazy. It's not her being forgetful. It's just part of the mechanism. If you look up, I'm not a big WebMD fan, but if you look up WebMD or Google ADHD and like a list of what are the warning signs, those are like the top two: leaving cabinets open and things. And I just thought it was her just being a kid and, being a pain in my butt. And then, we got her the official diagnosis, got her on some medication, and man, the whole world changed. Like, it's just, she's more organized and things are just going smoother, and we don't have the attitude swings and all that. But it's the problem is, how does a coach know that, right? A kid comes into practice and they just don't seem focused, and you're upset because you feel like they're not concentrating. It's not that they're not trying. It's just something's wired differently, and at that moment they can't. And then we end up getting frustrated with the player gets upset, and we just pile onto it. There's just a lot of things I don't think we're prepared for as coaches that we need to be. And that means that we have to seek it out and learn how to kind of work on it and study it ourselves.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a couple of athletes where we've tried to figure out how to help them learn. I've got a couple I've got the whole group, like 4 or 5 freshmen who are just nice kids, just starting the sport, haven't played before. and a couple of them are tall enough to be middles. So you can, if we all have I won't say we all. I have a stereotype of middles.
Right.
They're perfect. They behave just like middles. They stand there and don't move and don't understand how to transition and get in the setter's way. And there's a ball. I'm going to set it. And when the setter comes,
I was going to say, they want to set it.
Yeah, all that. It was interesting. My assistant coach, who works with kids a lot, he's a really young guy, real short, just turned 21, outstanding. And he was like, there's one kid, he said, he's a really kinesthetic learner. I mean, you can tell him all day long, but if you show him or move him, then he gets it. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then you read, if you read the teaching or learning literature, you're like, kinesthetic learning isn't a real thing. And I'm like, okay, whatever it is, if you show him and move him through it, it makes him work better. Call it whatever you want to call it to make it academically okay. But it did get me thinking about other kids where you kind of go, oh yeah, man, they're clueless. It's like, I don't know that they're clueless. And just you're describing Morgan's situation, for that brief time in the bedroom, you became the executive function for her. Right. And helped her get some progress, and the progress kind of unleashed some positive stuff, which is great. But that's still a coping mechanism of sorts. It's coping with a coach or a helper. But it gets me thinking about how I can better teach these guys, because when you go, boy, that guy's not that sharp. It's not that he's not that sharp. There's something else going on. They can learn these basics pretty well. It's figuring out how to help them through it, like maybe breaking it down like you did into, okay, first let's talk about just how to make contact with a ball. And now let's talk about how to run back from a net, and all of those things. And now try to do those two things in order, jump, block, come back. We won't even hit a ball now. Just get in position, and how to not go where the ball is, which is always a fun one. When they do the perfect transition right to where the ball is and it needs to be set, and they're standing right underneath it, and the setter's going, get out of my way, and all that. That just takes time. But it's interesting that we often kind of go, oh, he's just not getting it. And it's like, no, we're just not teaching it right.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the whole thing about the learning styles, and to me that and muscle memory. I hope everyone can see my quotes there. Muscle memory are like two of my biggest pet peeve is mental toughness, but that's a whole nother topic for another day. But I get from the academia standpoint about how there aren't those learning styles. We're not a visual learner and art. We're just learners. And really what it boils down to is we gravitate to whatever we like and we believe. It doesn't matter whether or not we actually are an auditory or visual learner. If I like learning visually more, chances are I'm going to do it better and with more effort because I enjoy it more. And I think that's where that research kind of could use a better marketing spin on it. But yeah, one of the things that I really started to think about going back is we do some really strange things that might be detrimental to our kids that we just think wouldn't be. And the example that I think is the easiest is pregame warm up like music. I love metal, I love hard rock, but that's not what I want before a match. And if we're blaring a type of music that a player doesn't like, how motivated are they going to be on warm up? So are we sacrificing, for the group because they want to hear this type of music to warm up, but there's this other group that's not a motivating factor? How do we deal with that? How do we rectify that? And I think that happens a lot, that we do a lot of things that might be detrimental, but we don't realize it and we don't take the time to look at it. And really what that led me to was completely blowing up how we do warm-ups. We are very, very individualized in warm-ups. I don't care. We get there an hour before we have to start, or, we get the hour on the clock and then the last 20 minutes are the official warm-up from NCAA. But for that first 40 minutes, they can do whatever they want. If I have a player that wants to sit with headphones in the corner of the gym, that's fine. If I have some players that want to do some sort of ball control or just, kind of play around, that's fine. It's relaxed. It's joking. If they want to see their parents because they haven't seen them for a month, since they've been at school, that's fine. But then they give me that 20 minutes. When I look at other schools and they come in and they get off the bus and they're all wearing the same thing, and they come in, they put their bags down, and then they start and they all do the same stretches, and then they do, everything's so regimented. I'm just wondering how much benefit actually comes from that. I get wanting to look at a team like a team and being a unit, but are you actually doing anything of beneficial substance by making them do, everyone doing the same routine or the same warm up? So I really changed that. And I did it more for the mental health side of it than I did for the physical or the game side of it. I just want them to be relaxed. The other big one is, calling serves. I had a coach, like, I don't know, they're in college now. They should know where to serve. Well, they should know where to serve. But if me helping them or calling the serve earns us points or makes them more relaxed and a better player, why wouldn't I do that? I think there's too many times that we go the route of, well, we want them to learn how to do it and they need to learn how to do it. And right, they do, but I think us helping there and being a little bit more of a mentor or a guide is probably more beneficial than teaching them a lesson at that moment.
I in my experience, I think it works well to teach them the craft of having a coach call a serve and trying to execute it, and then I kind of tailor it to what helps that player. I have players who and again, this is at high school, so they have a lot less experience. But I have players who I know if I call a serve, they're going to miss it. I'm going to get right in their head. So that's, and I've had a server my second year of coaching, and had these two setters, and this kid was fantastic. And I would never call a thing for her because she just had a knack. I mean, she's the kid who we're down 14-24 and served us back into the match, and we won 32-30. I mean, it's just like, how do you do that? I just, get out of the way. But I think everyone's different, because you do have some who go, oh, thanks, I really appreciated that. You give them a 1-6 gap and they go, oh, all right, that helped me out because I wasn't thinking that. So it's getting more in tune with what that player needs as opposed to what you want to do as a coach,
Yeah. And there's just those signs that you have to decide what's more important. And I'm the same way. I'll go to each player. Hey, do you want me to call it? Or do you, what do you want? What do you need? And that's kind of, what we go with.
We've talked probably a good half hour about missteps that coaches are making, and you've given us a couple of pretty good ideas. What are some other, I guess this is a question in two parts. What are some other things that, as a coach, that we should be doing? And then one of them I know, and also I'll prompt it to you right away. What types of resources can we go after to get ourselves started with some basic athlete mental prep?
Yeah. So the first part, I think what we need to do is we need to learn our team, especially in club volleyball, where typically you have that team for 1 year. It's a little bit different with college because we have hopefully those kids for 4 to 5 years. High school, it's even a little bit different because while they may play JV the first 1 or 2 years, they're going to be hopefully in your school for 4 years. In club, we form these teams for a year based off of, I mean, with the exception of 1 or 2 years that I remember, everything's purely based off of a physical tryout, right? I mean, when's the last time you've been to a club and they've done something that wasn't on the court that helped lead to their tryouts and their team selections? And I understand that time's limited and all that, but once they're on the team, I think we need to take the time to really learn about our players, learn their, socioeconomic background, what they're dealing with, what they're going through, because that kid may be late to your practice 15 minutes every Thursday and it's upsetting. But what you don't realize is that kid is 15 minutes late because he's got to babysit his little brother and sister until mom gets home working her second job that can help pay for club volleyball. And I just think that we don't take the time to really tune in and know our athletes on a personal level. Now, I know part of that is the scare of getting too personal with your athletes and the fear of that whole side of things. So we have to find that happy middle where we are compassionate and really aware of our athletes on our team and can be compassionate with them, and we don't dial it too much where we're that creeper coach and we're getting banned from our organization. So that's tough. And then we also have to make the time. What is your plan? Just like you plan out your season, hey, the first couple months we're going to work on basics and then we're going to move into our offense. What's your mental plan? And don't just say, well, we'll do something. Like, carve it out. With the para teams, when we started that in 2018, we made sure that this is what we wanted to spend some extra time on, 20 minutes here. And it really comes down to most of the plans that I put in place for, say, example, a U16 club volleyball team is 5 to 10 minutes a day away from their practice, and maybe 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes at their practice is the only intrusion that we have. So it's just a matter of making the plan. The problem is there isn't one. It's, hey, we're going to practice these 2 days a week, and I'll see you on Thursday. I'll see you on Sunday. Then I'll see you on Thursday. I'll see you on Sunday. And there isn't really much in between. And there's no plan of, hey, you guys can do this. And then that kind of leads into BJ's second question about resources. And I mean, again, not to sound like a commercial, like I offer self-paced online courses. I offer cohorts where I can take your whole team through it, or your whole club. There's a ton of people out there that do a lot of good stuff. You just need to get in contact with them and work out a program. Ask your club director, ask your coach, what their thoughts are. Talk to your boosters if maybe that's something your boosters can play. It saddens me because when I look at the money that's spent on things in club volleyball, travel and uniforms, and mental training could be such a small fraction of that cost. It should not be a barrier into getting help. But for whatever reason, the phone doesn't ring until there's a problem. And that in itself is a problem.
So I'm a middle school coach, let's say. And I'll take the extreme example. I'm a parent who gets drafted into being the middle school coach, or a teacher that gets drafted into that. And first thing I generally see is, oh, can you send me some drills? Can you send me some, what should I be doing in practice and all of that? And, we all have our stuff we kind of recommend. If you were working with that type of coach and said, okay, here's what you can do with the kids 5 or 10 minutes a day, what would you do?
This one's really easy for me because this is probably my, everyone has their signature thing or what they believe in the most. For me, it is 100% journaling. If you're asking what's the easiest and probably the cheapest thing to do to get players and teams into this space and working on it, have them buy a journal. You can get one as fancy as $30, a moleskin leather bound, up to $1.50 at Walmart for a composition book. But you as a coach, give them time before and after practice to journal and have self-reflection, because that to me is the biggest problem. We have coaches that provide feedback or feed forward, but kids have not learned how to do self-feedback and self-evaluation. And for a kid that's maybe struggling, maybe they have a problem and they want to talk to the coach, but they're afraid to, they could work that out in their journal. They can write out what they're going to talk to the coach, how they're going to talk to the coach, what the coach may say, and play that scenario out, writing it out in the journal, which gives them sort of like a draft of saying it, and then go to the coach with it. When it comes to club, most clubs practice 2-3 times a week. So you're asking kids to work really hard on one day and then have multiple days off. And hopefully when they come back in, they pick up where they left off. Are they, how do they know where they left off? And a journal is a great way for them to say, okay, this is how I thought practice went. This is what I did well. This is what I need to work on. And then when maybe they're getting ready to go to that next practice, they can look at the journal and say, okay, this is what worked really well for me last practice, so I'm going to continue to work on that. because coaches are dealing with, 10, 13 kids. So they can't remember what every kid was doing right, every kid was doing wrong. But I think journaling is a great way to help the kids start that process. And it helps with conflict resolution. Sometimes they can just write in the journal. They're having a problem with a teammate. Instead of just going off on them on the court, they write it down and work that conversation through the journal. And then they realize, like, okay, this is how I should say it. And this is how the communication should go. And it kind of takes that heat of the moment out of it. It's not always the easiest to start, especially with boy teams. Writing can be a bit of a thing. And there's a lot of considerations, and again, that could be a whole nother episode. But there are ways that you as a coach can say, okay, hey, just fan me your journal so I can see your writing. I don't want to see what you're actually writing, but I want to see that there's at least ink on the page. That way I know you're doing something. And that's kind of how we hold them accountable for it without actually reading. Because if I'm the problem, I want my players to be able to be honest and open in their journal, how they hate me or they don't like what I'm doing, because that's how we have to work through it. I don't want them to hold back because they think I'm going to read it and then retaliate or hold it against them. So there's a whole process to adding journaling, but that's by far the easiest. And I can't say enough about how every team should do it.
Yeah, we when I started a team of 11s, and most of them obviously were 10. And I stayed with that team just by circumstance through their 17s year, and then their 18s year, they were committed to coming back. But of course, it was the COVID year. The first thing, and I'm certain this was on your advice, was I went and bought them all, the $1.50 composition book and a pen, and said, here you go. You're going to have this, and when we talk about volleyball ideas, you can put notes in there. If you want to think about, what your highs and lows were, what your goals are for today or for the weekend or whatever it is, you can write that in there. You can write silly stories to yourself about volleyball or whatever. Well, let's have them out. I mean, we didn't specifically take, well, no, I take that back. We did at the end of practice usually give just a couple of minutes, go write some thoughts down, but I wanted them out. I wanted them sitting on the bench with a pen on top of it, so that they could run over and write something down if they learned. And that they were pretty good about it for the first 3 or 4 years. As we started getting, towards that cool stage, and then it wasn't, then I didn't see it as much. But I still know that those journals were in their bags and they were writing stuff in them. So I think I probably could have done a better job of that. So I'm glad to hear your advice on that.
Yeah, and we all can, even my team, I slack on it a little bit, but I think the biggest thing, Steve, I think you make a really good point, and actually even BJ, you said about you went out and got them. I think as a team, as a coach or a program, you should get the journals. So at the very least, you go out and buy the 12 journals that you need for $1.50. You spend the $26 and you buy the journal, because you may have kids on the team where that might be a barrier. Some kids can buy a $30 journal and it's no problem. Other kids might have problems getting to the store to do it. So don't put them in the position of feeling awkward. Just, here you go. You can use this journal, or you can go out and buy your own, whatever you're comfortable with, but at least give them something to start with. And the cost, and again, I don't want to sound like a commercial, but for me, like my biggest program that I do is a 6-week live program, and it's $500 a team. If you're carrying 10 kids, that's $50 a kid. So are you telling me that 6 weeks of mental training with your kid isn't worth $50? And that's a tough swallow for me when you're spending thousands of dollars. I mean, that's your jersey basically. Guys are spending $50 on a single jersey. And then you wonder why teams have, and it's not going to fix everything. It's always a process. It's not like magically the team's going to be better, but it's giving them the foundation and the skills to start and get better. But it just amazes me how no one really thinks about it until a tragedy happens, or the wheels start to fall off your team mid-season or towards playoffs. Then all of a sudden everyone wants to talk about it, but the work needs to be done from the beginning.
We're starting to get up against our time, but before we kick it back to Steve here for some final comments, what was the haiku of the day, or is it not yet written?
It is not yet written, only because, as some of you might know and follow, my dad is at 76 is racing in the Baja 1000 today. So I thought I would wait and do something special for the kickoff of that. So the haiku will probably be a little bit later reflection of that.
And then we can expect the haiku book out. Has it been a year yet? Or do you have
it's actually, yeah, it has been. And the first one, it's going to be 300. I decided to pare it down. Instead of doing 365, it's just going to be a book of 300 haikus. But the first 100 just came back from my editing group that took a look at it. So I'm now sending them the next 100, and hopefully the haiku book will be out in June. And it's funny that we joke about that, but for me, that was my burnout mechanism. As a coach and dealing with all of this, and especially the pandemic, I started writing haikus as my way of just kind of chilling. And it has now led to this whole massive project. But I think that's important for players and coaches, is making sure you have something outside of what you do to kind of blow that steam off.
When they edited those haikus, they didn't take out or add any syllables, did they? They understood that.
They were fully understanding of the situation, and there were some times where I put in, like the word was supposed to be and I put in an, or the little errors that we make. But no, they knew not to structurally. They weren't allowed to touch anything.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, Dan. What do you have, Steve?
Oh, Jen just got me thinking about an incident with my son. My wife went to actually, we both went to talk with one of his teachers. It was teacher's night, and he said, your son, he's great. He shares his opinion. He's one of the more outspoken guys. He said, I just wish he wouldn't sit there and tell everybody how bad iambic pentameter is. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess railing against iambic pentameter. So who knew? So we had no idea, but
right.
It is important to kind of figure out all of this stuff in interacting, and I've had more instances in the last couple of seasons through the pandemic of having to take a player aside and apologize to them for, I got on one guy because we're in the middle of a match and he gets warned by the ref, and I made an assumption on what was said and what happened, and when I got all the facts back in, it was like, okay, I overreacted. I'm sorry. Let's move ahead with this. But you were right. I was wrong. That happens, and I hope you can let me off the hook there. But let's get back at it. And maybe there's a little more vulnerability right now in change that our athletes are undergoing. And I think some of this, I could see even more of the discussion maybe the next time we get you on, talking a little bit more about practical things coaches can do. Because if I'm a middle school coach, that idea about journaling and maybe some other things that we can do when we see players struggle with a skill or a situation, or they have internal conflict. I coach adults a lot. I tell them, look, you have an introverted player or an introverted colleague, give them space, but not in the group meeting. Give them space outside the group meeting where they can get back to you with their ideas, and you'll be amazed at the kind of stuff you get. It's the same thing with players. I have a setter who's just quiet and has been for 4 years. I could have been yelling at him to get loud, but it's not going to help him. And he gets it done, it's in his own way. So anyway, this has been great, Dan. I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of kibitz with this and learn a little bit about what you do as well, and where it might be helpful to teams. BJ, got anything before we go? Because I'm out.
Can I give?
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. Can I give one last? I I just thought about this. Like if we're
Yeah.
doing the go away message, check locally for someone that is in mental training, a mental coach. There's tons of us out there that's probably close to you. If there aren't any, reach out to a local college or a local community college, because there's students that need service hours that could help your team or program out. And lastly, if you can't, find someone like me or the tons of others that can do it remotely or nationally or whatever. The help's out there. You just need to look for it. And you as the coach don't have to do it. You don't have to put another hat on. Bring someone in to help you.
Super. Well, with that, we're going to go and see people next week, hopefully. We'll get this in a podcast form, hopefully, if I get a little bit of time this week. And we'll get together again. Say hello to Morgan for me and for BJ, and we'll see you later.
Well, thanks, guys. It was awesome.